Good evening.
Ganguly.
Good evening.
Let the record reflect that Clerk Segris is both talking and present. Slavens
Good evening.
and Trustee Snyderman is absent.
Thank you. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Can I please have a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved.
Support.
Motion made by Clerk Seegers, supported by Treasurer Slavens. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say nay. Motion passes. All right, tonight's session is on the budget and it will be led by Director Wendy Trumbull. So Wendy, I think you have sharing capability, so please take it away.
Perfect, thank you. All right. So thank you all for coming tonight. This is the, kind of our finance fun night for the evening. We usually don't have too many of these presentations, so it's always fun for us to do this. First, before I go any further, I really want to thank Carolyn Cox, who is the budget manager sitting to my right. She is the brains behind this whole operation. She coordinates with all the departments, gets all the people and personnel costs out of all the departments, tries to work in the union steps, fringe benefits, and everything into the budget. And it's a big task. So first, thank you to Carolyn, because she's the one who does hours and hours of endless work. So I appreciate all her efforts. And also Caitlin Pavel, a lot of you haven't known her. She is our finance coordinator. I didn't get the right position. My brain's not working today, but she's my executive assistant. She also helps coordinate. She's been helping with the priority-based budgeting, trying to get all the budget presentations together and really helping the departments out. So we got a great team in finance and really township-wide. All the departments put a lot of effort into this, and we really appreciate this big team effort to get this to the board. So it's hours and hours of work. So thank you to everybody for your help with this, and thank you to the board for your attention tonight. We are going to do this setup the same way that we've done the last presentations for many years. We're going to start out with the 24 budget, which we already really covered with the board in detail on April 4th. We're not going to go over the entire 24 budget like we did that day. We're only going to cover the changes to the 24 budget since you initially saw it. And then that's the budget. In a couple weeks, actually on November 28th, we're going to ask the board to adopt the 2024 budget. After that, we're going to introduce the 25 budget. We're going to go over the assumptions that were used in coming up with the big numbers. I'm going to turn it over to the departments to go over their requests for the 25 budget. After all the departments have gone through their items, we'll circle back and kind of give an overall summary of the 25 budget. And then see what questions you might have. We are not asking the board to adopt this budget. It's just kind of a working document as an outline of where we think from the department's perspectives where we would like the board to approve moving forward in a year out. So with that, going to just review the assumptions real quick that we used for 24. Property taxes for the 24 year are going to go up based on inflation of 5%. If you recall, state of Michigan allows you to go up by the inflation or 5%, whichever is less. I think inflation ended up like 8% last year, so 5% it is. However, the overall revenues we're estimating to go up by about 6% with the new construction as well. And we work with the assessor's office to come up with the overall property tax growth on the new construction as well. State shared revenue is based on the state's estimation, which they're estimating it to be about $600,000 increase for over 23's budget. And then the other revenues are kind of based on the prior years and estimation of future permits. Really, permits are the other real big revenue item that we have. Otherwise, it's, there's nothing really significant that you can estimate other than going on the past. The expenditure assumptions, the employee assumptions, they do include all of the previously board-approved restructuring and the related additional positions. So initially, when the budget was proposed back in April, there was a number of positions that had not made its way into the budget yet. Positions like the economic development manager, I think the resident advocate. There was a number of positions that hadn't actually gotten into the budget when it was shown to the board. So those are now in there, and you'll see that in a minute. All of the wages were based on 3% increase or as the contracts required. Pension cost was in at about 10% increase, medical costs at a 7%, prescription costs at 11%. All of those costs are based on our, CAPNIC has provided us the medical and prescription estimations, MERS, the pension. And we, again, included pre-funding the OPEB for $1 million, which we have been doing every year, trying to get that up to a suitable funded status level. The only additional pre-funding right now for the pension is in the police fund. A number of years ago, if you recall, there was about $600,000, I think, that came back when the DDA had been capturing the police millage, and it should not have been. Speaking with the director at that point in time, it was requested that those extra funds be put in to help get their pre-funding or their funded percentage of pension costs up to a suitable level as well. So we've been doing that as well. So with this, this chart that's up on the screen, you can see every fund listed on the far left, and the middle column there shows what the projected transfer to or use of fund balance was in April. So if you can see the general fund in April was projecting to use about $3.5 million of fund balance, but now with all the changes that are being requested, it's actually using fund balance of about $6 million for a difference of an additional use of fund balance of $2.4 million. I'm going to get into those specifics on the next slide. So hold your thoughts or questions on that one. The roads fund went up by $200,000 just based on the projects that they're anticipating having. Fire fund went up by $1.8 million use of fund balance. That's strictly the ambulances, the EMS vehicles that were already purchased by the board are expected to come in, and that's when we're going to expense those. So really nothing that the board hasn't approved there yet. Police fund actually is using a little bit more fund balance. Or excuse me, it's transferring less to fund balance by about $26,000. Basically, their income is going from $389,000 to $363,000. That's as a result of moving a generator, which you'll see down below in the 911 service fund, about halfway down. There's about $189,000, if you see right there. We moved a generator purchase from coming out of the police fund and using 911 dollars for that, so that helped fund that. Otherwise, I believe there's a little bit of an increase in salaries that offset that $26,000. Cable TV fund at $245 is some additional capital we are using PEG fees to purchase. That's restricted dollars that have to be used for capital purchases. So it's not an unrestricted fund. DDA is just due to the restructuring of some of the DDA positions within that fund. Moving down to the opioid settlement fund for $89,000. This is where we are now putting the social worker expenses is now in this fund. We're using the opioid settlement money to the extent we can to fund the social worker. Infrastructure down here for $500,000. We put a budget in to help pay for the sidewalk apps that we got money from the state to fund. So we put some budget dollars in there so we can get moving on that for '24. Golf course fund, there was a little bit of extra capital. Water and sewer, there's some additional capital. And then fleet maintenance is pretty minor. As far as the general fund goes, it was about $2.49 million. I summarized the large adjustments. We sent out, last Wednesday, Excel sheet that kind of summarized all these results, but had a bunch of different line items on it. This sheet is kind of summarizing in total what the large adjustments added up to. So there's about $80,000 for the early voting staff that is needed due to the legislation. The staffing related positions was almost $900,000, $872,000. Those were all the positions and previously approved board positions that occurred earlier this year, '23. Some of the staffing related that was a part-time only, just due to the wage scale increases that the board approved, I believe in '22, and actually having a good idea of where our part-time is now that we're getting more fully staffed. We needed an additional $15,000 there. This ERP allocation, if you recall, last year the board set aside $1 million for that ERP. That's going to roll forward into '24, as that's when the ERP is going to be needed. There's some other parks items in here that were non-capital. The board had allocated some money at our previous workshop to start some of the the pocket park planning. So that's what that number represents. There's some other ITI items in here. There's many changes, but a couple of the big ones were $72,000 for a phone system upgrade, their VoIP renewal, and then some copier usage. The actual copier costs have gone up significantly, so it's $127,000 for that. Legal costs have gone up about $92,500. Sports center, there's a bunch of items on the sports center, but overall it's about a $4,000 increase use of subsidy. Supervisor's office had a couple items for the IndiGov software that the board had approved, and some conferences and seminars. Our utility costs have gone up a lot. DTE's fees have raised significantly over the last year, kind of unbeknownst to us. They didn't tell us right away when we were adopting this budget, so I think their fees actually went up like 20%. So that's a pretty big cost. And then we had a big transfer out to the community center because there's some capital items that were needed for the summit. The community center is the summit. There was some additional capital that was needed, and in order to fund those, we had to transfer money from the general fund into that community center fund to offset those items. I blew through that really quick. Is there any questions on that? Okay. This next slide shows the 2024 capital projects. These are the non-public safety items. So the ones that are highlighted in green are the ones that changed from what was initially provided to the board. All of the departments this last year, if you recall, I talked about it at the last budget presentation. We were working on a 5-year capital plan. We did complete that, and we'll provide that listing to the board up in the next week or so. But we met with the supervisor, deputy supervisor, and the treasurer and clerk came to a couple of the meetings trying to go through all of the capital items that were being requested. So we do have a 5-year capital plan. These items were discussed with the supervisor as well. So again, the green items are the ones that changed. There were some lights, the cyclodrama lights. It's something at the Village Theater. If there's any specific questions, I'm sure the individual directors can help you. We're using PEG fees for that. The floor at the summit, if you look down at this next, this green, at $200,000, that was what the board had approved for the floors to level that floor of the PDC room down at the summit. We took out the drop box for 24, as that should be done this year, as the intention. Yeah. So some of the tablets and computers were reduced in CLS, but elections had some new equipment that was needed as a result of the new legislation. ITI had some changes as well. Victor can speak to those if you have questions on it. There was when we bought the vehicle for the supervisor, we had taken away a vehicle from facilities. Facilities was kind of helping to pay for it because facilities couldn't get the vehicle that they needed. So now the vehicles are back in stock, the Explorers that they need, so they need to purchase now for 24. Cable is purchasing a generator for the summit. We're using PEG fees for that. Fellows Creek, the golf course, needs some equipment. Pheasant Run, this $36,000 beverage carts, actually the board already approved that this last summer, knowing that we weren't going to get delivery for it until 24, so we're adding that to the budget. We've got some rough mowers, some cardio leases that changed. We got rid of the pool pump that actually was already replaced, I believe, with the current construction that we're doing. And then changing around some of the timing of some of these Village Theater replacements. We're going to replace the air handle, and then the chillers are going to come, I believe, in 25 instead of doing those in 24. Those are some of those changes. And then in the public safety side of it, the Fire Station 1 kitchen renovation, I believe we're taking that out of 24, but that's moving back a year or two. These are the ambulances that I spoke about, ambulances and pumper engines that the board already approved. We're expecting to take delivery of those, so we got to expense those in 24. And then we added some furniture for the fire stations. For police fund, the actual server that they already had budgeted is going to be a little bit more expensive, so they bumped up that cost. the generator moved from police fund to 911 fund, and then they have some handguns that they would like to purchase here in '24 as well. Okay. I'm not going to go over these revenues by fund. We talked about all these items. I'm not going to go over these expenses by fund. What I will show you is with all these changes, here's where fund balance will show up at the end of '24 if we're requesting, if you guys approve what we're requesting. This number right here, the amended 2023 fund balance, is taking what the actual fund balance was at the end of '22 and taking into account what the amended budget was for '23 as of October 12th. If the board has approved any other budget adjustments since that date, those have not been worked into this number. But this is the amended fund balance that we would be looking for all these funds with the proposed revenues, expenditures, and the proposed change in fund balance. This is what the ending fund balance would be for all these funds. So for general fund, it'd be about 12.6 million, roads 5.4, fire 6 million, and police fund 8.6. I'm not going to go through all those, but all of those fund balances, while we're still projecting to use, at least for fire and general fund, significant fund balance, we'll still end up with over 15% fund balance in all of those funds at the end of '24. While we have worked in some of the board priorities and increasing our capital usage. Questions? No? Crickets? All right, then I did my job. 25 budget. I'm going to go into real quick on the 25 stuff. The assumptions used, which are very similar to the 24. The 25 revenue inflation is actually based on the inflation factor for the year ended September 30th of '23. So we got that we see what that was, and that was over 6%. So again, for 25, our revenue will be a 5% inflation factor plus an additional 1% for the growth. So we'll have another 6% increase in property tax revenue for 25, assuming there's no big recessions between now and then and people start trying to reduce their property tax values of their home. So right now it looks like it's about a 6% growth, so that's good news. State shared revenues, the state doesn't really come out with what their figures are this as far in advance as we prepare our budget, so we assumed a 2% growth over 24s. And again, the other revenues we base on the prior year's revenues and estimations of what we think the future permits will be. Expenditures for the employee assumptions, same thing. As we previously spoke about, we used a 3% full-time wage increase or whatever the union contracts dictated. Pension costs, we said were a 10% increase. Capnic is actually anticipating our medical costs to go down about 16%, but they're expecting our prescriptions to go up about 12%. I'm sure Rochelle would be happy to explain more details of that if the board had questions on that, but that's actually good news that our trends are going the right way for 25. For our OPEB funding, we assumed those retirees costs would go up would go down about 5% overall from 24. And that's as a result of, we will be using a stop loss insurance for our fully insured, our fully insured prescription program, which we have not been doing in the past, which is actually going to save our retiree medical costs money. So that's good news. And then I still use the $1 million of pre-funding for the OPEB. So from there, those are the assumptions. I know I kind of blew through this stuff, but I want to turn this over now to the departments to do their presentations. So I will first turn it over to Police and Director Baugh. Do you want to take this over? And I'll get their presentation up on my screen.
Yes. All right. Thank you. As we get started, thank you for having us. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you, Wendy, and all the folks, my cohorts here, the directors, for the work we do coming into this. And I'd like Wendy said, we have some people behind the scenes that do the work of this project, primarily themselves, with some support from us. And thank you, Barb, for that. Barb's been with us for over 33 years, and does and the knowledge that she has are just amazing. So with me today, I have Captain Biley. He's been in the position of captain for a year now. He's in the 24th year or so since starting the Detroit Police Department 24 years ago. And I have Captain DeGrant, who's been in position since this summer as a captain. He started with us around 23 years ago, if I'm not mistaken. Department, I think it's important to realize what we actually do. A budget to the police department really is broken down to needs and wants, and we recognize that, and we try to maintain a lean police department, work with our command staff and our administrative group, and work with the supervisor's office and the board of trustees to set the service level for the township. Protect life. We generate some solutions with the folks in the community, our partners, and we protect property. It's what it breaks down to. The budget process, we have internally with the police department, this structure here, you've seen it before. All of you folks have been on our budget, or these budget meetings before, and this is the same slide, essentially. And you know, from the line level of our organization that goes through this process, recommendation to the finance director and the supervisor's office to you for items to be approved for our police department, if you would. Right now, as you see, we have 100 sworn personnel budgeted. We spent the last year really working with you, ultimately the board, our finance director, the deputy supervisor, supervisor's office, finding ways to recruit personnel, be able to maintain the standards of this organization. Focus of ours, which was headed up by Captain Biley and the recruiting team and our HR department to bring folks back into the organization. And we're doing very well bringing interest back into the organization, and we thank the board for the support through the contract. We have 2 captains, 6 lieutenants, 11 sergeants, 80 police officers. You'll see soon, what our structure looks in comparison to some of our comparables. Next to me is our operations managers. 70% of the salary is paid by us and 30% by the fire department. We have budgeted 2 dispatch supervisors, which that selection process will be starting soon. We have the IT systems coordinator, which was recently approved by you folks again after a period of years of not having that position primarily. That process is starting in November also. We have 1 crime analyst. We have 20 public safety service officers. 10 of which are paid by right now by the police and by the fire department. We have 3 ordinance officers that are paid for by the police department. 5 total, 1 by the building and 1 by fire. 5 secretary clerk 4s and 5 clerk 3s. If you would, just real quick, you can see what we believe our population to be right now, our total sworn. Farmington Hills, you can see the staffing difference with the township, and I support the fact that I think we provide the best service of all those communities. I just compared us to our exceptional police departments. Grants in different ways over the last 12 years to bring some things in. Like we said, there's wants and needs. Some of these issues are more wants than needs, so we find other ways and other streams of revenue to bring the money in or bring the tools in, which includes some forfeiture over the last 12 years that we were able to pay for. Yes. Okay. As you see here with the forfeiture funds, we have been able to purchase the K-9 vehicles, the expenses for the K-9 program, the term de-escalation, and finding different ways to solve problems. We were able to buy some less lethal shotguns, our motorcycles, our speed trailers, our radar units, laptop computers in some areas, some furniture for our detective bureau and records, and bicycles for our patrol division. You will see in the budget, the 2025 versus 24 budget expenses increased 8% excluding capital, and there was a revenue increase of 23%. At the proposed budget, where the account classification for over 5%, which was a requirement to bring forth why. The why is always important. Some of the contractual raises incentives in 2023 contributed to a 9% in that first category, and on the fringe benefits, an 18% increase. Again, when you look at the contributing factors for the increase here with the traffic forfeiture, which is capital purchase for 2025, you'll see a request for a motorcycle. As we rebuild our traffic unit, it's going to be quite important to have the tools. Most of us who live in the township recognize, and those of us that work here realize the traffic in our community is a concern. So it's going to be one of the number one priorities as we put the staffing back in place and make our allocations in the coming year. And you can see again using the DEA forfeiture account to help offset the cost of a Tahoe for our K-9 vehicle, which is due. There's some requirements that we have to responsibilities. When you look at prisoner care, we move from with the court, 35th District Court, some of our lodging went from outstate to Wayne County, so there's a 31% increase there. Some of our responsibilities as a police department to the township, our animal care increase of 18%. And technology, the standards and expectations of the community and the standards we set for ourselves of solving cases, you'll see, and I think you'll see it for the near future, is increases when it comes to software and hardware support to be able to actually investigate. So when you see the gray key, the LPR system in the software that we have access to, not the physical cameras, the BURLA, and some of the things we need with FOIA, you'll see that increase in 25 with 13%. The FARO, the action target system, the generator, causing the 104% increase. I believe the majority of that's because of the generator. And some of the contractual tuition benefit issues with come along with training and education, a 25% increase there. And you see the liability insurance and the indirect costs that come from the township at 14%. Capital outlay with computers, you can see it's pretty self-explanatory. The big one there is the 6 hybrid vehicles at $300,000 for 2025. We've been real fortunate to find some vehicles working with Director Norwood. I almost called you a captain. Apologize. Finding vehicles here right now has been very challenging, especially hybrid vehicles. And we're able to find some in Georgia here recently for 2023, but in 2025 we expect to be able to find hybrid vehicles about $300,000. When you break down our entire budget, you look, looking at a pie chart, you can see, the discretionary funds are very limited. A lot of money is tied up in wages and fringe benefits and indirect costs. So when it comes down to it, capital purchases, supplies, other services are at 13%. The rest of the budget is essentially tied up. I'm going to turn it over to Captain Biley as I take a drink of water here, but I appreciate your attention on this, and I'll be back on the mic here shortly.
Good afternoon, everyone. So developing items of interest, the first item is staffing levels. We worked hard in 2023 to try and get our staffing levels back up again, and we're getting there, but it's not completely finished. So that's going to carry over into 2024. As far as wellness, recovery, fitness locker rooms, so what we're trying to do as an organization is do better with our peer support and our health and wellness. That's been a part of our 5-year strategic plan for a long time. And what I look at is short-term goals and long-term goals. And so a wellness recovery room is a short-term goal that I can do immediately to try and deal with trauma for our officers. I can't stop the trauma from occurring. However, I can help the healing process. And so what we're looking at is a wellness recovery room. We'll call it a trauma recovery space is what it will be. What it does, again, is it helps reduce high-impact events. It'll also be able to be an open space to come in compliance with the Nursing Mothers in the Workplace Act, a privacy place for someone to be able to go. We're also looking at, when I talk about long-term, there's a term called PEPCP, which is post-event personal care. And that really is, when you talk about the cycle of care, how do we help them on the back end, the long-term stuff? And so this wellness room gives us space to be able to do that long-term, working with our embedded clinician, working with our peer support team, and then working with EAP to be able to do, again, complete that cycle of care. As far as the fitness and locker rooms, fitness fits in with that long-term cycle of care, working with the Eligala, working with our wellness group. They talk about the health benefits of physical fitness, and so we need space to be able to do that. The locker rooms is our greatest need. We can't expand as an organization without having extra lockers for everybody. We've outgrown our space, and so we need to be able to bump out to get more lockers into that room there. Ongoing education and training, that goes hand in hand with our staffing levels. So as we increase staffing, we have to make sure that we're providing them the support that we can continue to maintain our standards as a police department. And especially if we want to progress and grow with some of the new training that's coming out, we got to be able to afford that, and we have to plan for it. Succession planning, so again, that goes with looking into the future and how can we properly service a community that continues to grow. So we have to grow as a police department with that, so we have to lay out our plans to be able to build. That ties in with the locker room. Again, if we want to grow as an organization, well, they have to have space. And as we get more employees, and we talk about that wellness center or trauma recovery, we want to make sure that we're adequately planning for a growing organization, for a growing township. This all fits into our 5-year strategic plan. We're going to extend it by 1 year. Our plan right now is coming to a conclusion. With our staffing levels being the way they are, we can't accomplish some of our immediate goals. So we're going to reevaluate where we are this time next year, that we can put together a true 5-year plan that's accomplishable by us. Thank you.
Would, Captain DeGran's going to cover E911 budget.
And your seats. All right, so your local cell phone surcharges, the E911 funds, these are collected annually, as you know, and the estimated revenue for 2025 is $500,000. Comparing 25 to 24, we didn't have any expenses that are over 5%, and we estimate that the revenues are increasing by 6%. Looking ahead, our capital outlay for 2025, there's some purchases that we're looking at. This has to do with our dispatch center, of course. This is the mobile and portable radios, which are that's around $50,000, and the capital outlay for the machinery and equipment. We're looking at $40,000 for that. Developing items of interest. Portion of this 911 funds, we can use it for our parking lot security for the fence because of the radio tower and the emergency generator. The other thing is our portable radios for police and fire are coming to the end of life. And we're looking to invest in that, which is estimated around $500,000.
Right. We're almost to the end here for police. But this is the opioid settlement fund that we had spoken about. And thank you, Wendy, for covering it. That was the one question actually that came up last year, is how we're going to fund the embedded clinician. And, it's just our way of, addressing the comprehensive approach with substance abuse and mental health and looking at different solutions within that program. So we all know where that money is coming from, and we have an estimated revenue of $29,621. It's something to be mindful of when you're looking at all these competing interests. Some of the things down the road, as Joe was talking about, in the long term, the funding level, the fund balance, the forfeiture funds, which we have a good amount of money out there that needs to be settled. Hopefully some of that money will offset some of our goals. But when you look at this opiate settlement fund, we like to use our portion of that to pay for the wages and benefits of that direct hire, which the interviews are November 6th and November 7th for that position. any questions from the board, I think it's important to remember how we started. You know, our job is to protect life, solve some problems with our people, our partners, and protect property. And I'll leave it to this board to help us work with the administrative team, the finance department, as we set the service level for our citizens. Our citizens expect a lot of us, and we appreciate the support.
Questions?
Yeah, could you just go back one slide, if you don't mind? Back, maybe one more. That one. Yes. So, just looking at a spreadsheet that we received right here. It's showing that for 2025, that proposed revenue is $87,445 for the opioid settlement fund. And it's showing that 29,621 is for 2024 proposed revenue. It's page 21.
Second here. What'd you say? So on the finance document, I'll let Wendy speak to it. I think she found it.
Yeah, so the 29,000 is the actual money coming from the opioid settlement fund that we're expecting to come in from the different settlements. We actually have $57,000 additional coming from the police fund to help cover the cost of the salaries that the money coming in from the settlement is not covering for the clinician.
So the 29,621 is for which year?
2025.
Is for 2025, but that's what we're expecting to get from the settlement. The remainder of the revenue that's coming into that fund for 2025 is actually coming from the police fund to help cover the costs.
Transfer in, okay.
A transfer in, correct.
Okay, thank you.
It might help too, Wendy, if you could help explain, like, it's so variable, the way that fund is paid out over the 18 years.
Yeah, it is very variable. We got, like years 1 through 5 for one of the many companies of the settlement was supposed to pay a certain amount each year, and then they paid a lump sum up front for 5 years. So we did get a lump sum. So for 24, we haven't had to transfer any money. We won't have to transfer money in from the police fund to cover the clinician because we had so much money up front. 25, we're not anticipating. We're not quite sure. We're having a hard time finding and tracking exactly who's paying what and when, and with many of the pharmacies now filing for bankruptcy as a result of this, we're not even sure if we're going to get the money at this point, with that bankruptcy claim, so.
Both Wendy and I are not attorneys, but I believe some of the money are tied up in lawsuits too, because of is it Ottawa County or one of the counties out west that we're suing?
I think everything that we've recorded right now as
Okay.
revenue is stuff that has been settled that we should be, we're entitled to receiving before the
Okay.
bankruptcy claim says we're not.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. And I'm glad you brought up the bankruptcies because I was wondering about that.
Yeah, we won't be, we recorded it based on what we think we're supposed to be getting, but we're obviously going to keep a close eye on that each year, and if we're not going to get it, we're basically just trying to keep track of this clinician separately, and to the extent that we can use these opioid funds to cover that cost, we want to do so. And if we can't, we'll transfer some money from the police fund, which was the initial plan anyways, to pay for it out of the police fund.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Other questions? Tanya?
So I just had a quick question on, are you anticipating any changes because of, what happened in August with the tornado and in the disaster and all that? Did you have any issues, and did you anticipate planning for any funding for that, like a generator or things like that? Or do you already have that? 'Cause-
That's a good question. Actually, all the way back to 17, we started having discussions, Chris and I and finance and MSD about replacing that generator because it was coming to end of life. As it relates to the tornado and the storms, if that's part of your question, our police officers were able to, just because of our function, we're able to handle that situation pretty easily for us. Well, it's very hard on our residents. We were able to get through that pretty easy for the police department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for the presentation. Thank you. Great job.
Okay, next up, we're going to have Director Stockline and the fire.
Turn this back on, and hopefully you can hear me a lot better. So I'm going to try and be your favorite director tonight and get over with this quickly so you guys can get out of here. But I honestly don't have a lot to cover here. Could you grab me that? So with this budget, obviously, like Chad said, we can't do anything without our support staff. And we moved Erica into the business operations coordinator earlier this year, and she's doing a fantastic job. So Barb has been mentoring her, and the succession planning is working well. So she really put all this together for us. So I can't thank her enough, and Barb for helping her out to get through this. And obviously, the man next to me here supports everything that we do and gets us through it all as well. So currently, we're 69 firefighter positions with 8 vacancies. We are losing another firefighter in 2 weeks from now. The good news is that we've got another one that I'm giving a job offer to on Thursday, and then we've got a couple more that are coming through the process that'll be interviewed in the next week or so. So got good news on that front. Operations manager, like Chad said, he pays 70%, we pay 30%. 100% for our operations coordinator, emergency manager, that comes out of the general budget. And then our public safety IT coordinator, 30%. Followed up with the secretary and a clerk, 3. Training officer, fire prevention, we still have 1 vacancy. If you remember, we had approved that other position for the prevention division as an inspector. It was almost, I think, last year at this time. And we never filled that because of our loss of positions down on the suppression side. So we're still holding that position in our budget. And then we have 2 dispatch supervisors, and they're both vacant at the time. And then 10 PSSOs or dispatchers, and the records clerk and ordinance officer. We'll continue to go for the grant funding, whether it's UASI, whether it's FEMA grants with SAFER grants, AFG. I plan on putting in for more SAFER grants. That one expired that we had a few years back with our 9 firefighters that we hired before. We'll reapply for that and see if we can get those other positions that we need for Station 4 coming up and see if we can get a few years of that paid for. But we're always looking for opportunities, whatever it is, we'll continue to do that. So expenses increased 5% from 24 to 25, and we'll explain what those were. So salaries, obviously, we continue to see an increase in salaries. We added the PSSO and Public Safety IT Coordinator. Our supplies continue to go up. These are the supplies that we use for ALS. They're growing awfully fast, and we continue to see a rise in that, as well as an increased run volume. So we continue to increase this larger amounts of money every single year. The uniforms, we budgeted that up to $90,000 for 25 because we're expecting to hire those additional firefighters for the new station. Capital outlay, computer, we always have that in there, 5,000. We bumped up the tablets from 2,000 to 5,000. And then, as Wendy said earlier in her slideshow, we've got the renovations at Station 1, and that includes the fire suppression system down on our machinery and equipment. Those stations are 25 years old, right around there. And so those kitchens are pretty worn out. And we had this budgeted for '24 for the station kitchens, and we're shoving that back until '25, just to see how everything goes with negotiations and everything else. So keeping that 43,000 in there for furniture, mattresses, that sort of stuff in the fire station that need to be replaced so often. And then that vehicles is one staff vehicle for upstairs. Just as PD talked about, majority of our salary, money goes to salaries and fringe benefits. So nothing different than what the police see in general. And then these are some of our considerations, and these are more for '24 than they are for '25. We've got our staffing issues, our fire inspector position and EMS coordinator that we're looking to hire as well. When we have that many firefighters, we'll need to have somebody in charge of all of their EMS certifications. Station 4, guys have done a great job. We were already moving forward with that. We've already got funding for that. We're working on the 5-year strategic plan. In fact, we have a meeting tomorrow night. So Kate, we're looking forward to, Diane. So, and then our accreditation process, Jamie's been working on that through the years, keeping up on that. And next year is our year that we have to go back in front of the committee and get our reaccreditation. So, and then the final thing is that we're still in contract negotiations, as you know, and so something to keep in mind as we move forward. That really wraps up the fire. If you want any questions on fire, I'm happy to answer those, like I said, and keep it short and sweet for you.
Great. Thank you very much. Great job.
All right, well, we're moving to emergency management. I'm going to go through this because if you thought fire was fast, this is even faster. But Will Hayes is not here tonight, but obviously through the tornado and stuff, you know who he is, and the flooding and
And COVID and
COVID, and yeah, the list goes on, right? And he works, day in and day out, day and night to make sure that we stay safe in the township. So this is budgeted under the general fund, and we get a portion of his salary reimbursed through a grant. He's got an 8% increase, and that is to upgrade some warning sirens. So we're looking at $15,000 for replacement of one of the outdoor warning sirens, and then for the salary and wages, 7% on the increase in salary. And then the bigger one is that 33% that you'll see. He's been working with HR to make sure that we have sign language interpreter for some of those emergencies that come up. So that's the big things in the emergency management. And like I said, nice and quick.
Any questions?
So, any questions about emergency management?
No? Thank you. I think, we just had the study session not too long ago, so we
Yep.
went over this.
So,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
all right.
Thank you. Great
Thank
job.
you.
All right, good job. I guess we're going to have to buy Chris drinks next time for being the shortest.
There really was no bet.
Well, but now, challenge for everybody else. All right, I'm going to turn it now over to Interim Director Norwood for the MSD. Let him have his first shot at a board or budget presentation.
Here we go.
Good evening, members of the board. This is my first time presenting the budget for MSD, so I'm actually very excited because there's some good stuff coming down the line. So, I also too have to have some thank yous to help put this budget together. Certainly the managers and most of them had family things tonight, but John Selmy's here from Public Works. Some of you know him. He's also willing to answer questions or something, but I think it's pretty self-explanatory when we go through this, but I'll do my best with this. Also, I have to thank Finance, because it was my first time, especially Caitlin Pavel was instrumental in putting this thing together, so thank you, Caitlin. I couldn't have done it without her. So here's our staffing levels. There's actually two changes that I want to note, and they're just, so Amy Hamilton did communications is no longer in the MST budget. Also, Devin was our IT person. She is no longer in the budget for us. So that's the big changes. No increases otherwise. Total budget, as you can see, Public Works covers the vast majority of the dollars that we spend, and also they reflect some of the major increases that we're running into just from water usage and sewer usage, account for over $4 million increase, and also garbage and rubbish removal, which you'll be hearing more about shortly. The bids are coming in tomorrow. John Selmy and I and the finance team will be working on those bids to get them as quickly as possible, because I know Treasurer Slavens needs the number to get it out on what we think it's going to run into for. We do expect an increase in fees in this. General fund activity is relatively flat. Director Trumbull mentioned things that on capital and some different revenues that make it up, but I don't think I need to cover those again. Okay, just going individual divisions, some of the highlights. The building inspection services is showing somewhat of a slight decline, but permit activity is still pretty high, and the value of the permit activity is staying pretty steady. So we anticipate that to continue into 2025. There are projects that are working their way through planning. Some big residential projects, and we hope to see those come to fruition in 2025.
Yeah, what is your permit? What is your permit total as of last week? I mean, what are we seeing? As
We're seeing, well, it was $1.5 million. So I've been reporting at the leadership meeting the permit activity every week, because IT produces that for us. And so it's a value of permitted work that I report on. And last week it was $1,500,000 that was permitted that week. So there's a lot of activity still going on in the township that's, and I see that's all investment by the private sector in our town. Here's some graphical. You can see we're getting a little flat, a little decline here on the different permits and the permit revenue.
I think Kate has a question.
You had a question? I'm sorry.
Are you showing or giving us an idea of the value of the permitted activity, just to show that it's still very active?
Yeah, it's still very active. Also, I mean, during budget time, we report on these things, but I think it's important for you to know how much investment's going on a more short-term, more immediate, not quite real-time, but more basis, so that you know that the business owners, the property owners in the town are investing in the town.
Okay, so the only reason I was asking is because I just want to make sure that I understand correctly that our permits are a flat fee, not based on the amount of the project.
There's a minimal fee, and then there is some, as a project gets larger, it is based upon construction costs, yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
that helps. Thank you.
Yes, yes. And we track that. So for planning, we're at fully staffed now. I don't know if you had a chance to meet with Zach Michaels and some of his, he has to do with the trees around Township
Yes.
Hall, so that has been kind of his highlight of his early career with us right now. But he's going to be helping us with the urban forestry programs through planning as he's pursuing several grants, and we hope to bring those to fruition. We are seeing a slowdown somewhat in single-family demand, though things did pick up from a really slow start early this year at like Lombardo Homes out by Cherry Hill Village. And then redevelopment demand is still high on things that have already been developed, and we're seeing some changes come down the line. And planning still working towards their RRC, redevelopment ready communities, their certification. hope to have that done in 2024. So there's a lot, engineering has a lot going on. And as some of you know, Bill Surchick has been off. I had a conversation, he's getting ready to come back once he gets some clearances to do that. But in his absence, Charles has really stepped up to the plate with the engineering team. And he is working on a couple of things that are going to be coming to you in the relatively near future. First is the ASR, the road issue with the deterioration of the concrete. We're going to put together a plan on how we're going to spend that money we got from the state. And also Wayne County is indicating that they may be helping to fund us some dollars too. That's to be determined. We'll report back more when that comes to fruition. Also, after the flooding, Charles was pretty aghast, quite frankly, what happened at Grandview Estates in the southwest corner of the township with the water, how that moved through that field west of Bar Road into Grandview, the development. So we're talking Wade Trim now, developing a scope of work to start looking at what happened there and what are the things that we can start thinking about doing to stop not that to happen again, because we do anticipate something like that happening again, a heavy rain. I don't know if more to come on that too, but that'll in 2025 we'll have something for sure together. And the idea is it'll probably end up being a watershed approach to the stormwater issues. And so we're going to need, as elected officials, we're going to need your help getting other communities involved, because we'll do our best with staff, but we're going to need a lot of push behind with the elected officials, because it could end up costing us money in all the different communities. So. Also, November 14th, you're going to see Charles. We're going to have the session on the roads millage, and we're going to run down the past and then talk about some decisions about moving forward on different projects that we want to get done over the next 5 years. From facilities, John Z continues to work on the 5-year plan. We've had some pretty good success here with the swimming pool. I know that was some challenges early on, but we got the tile going, and we're still on target for December, not November. Yeah, making Greg happy with that. No, December, mid-December opening of the pool. So, and I know that Greg will probably talk to more about it in his time, but we hope to have some things happening in January, some celebratory things. Also, he continues working on EV, getting EV charging stations on township facilities and around the township. And he also, along with that, is working on energy efficiency projects as we replace HVAC equipment throughout the town. Public Works, couple highlights that I would like to mention is next year we're looking at creating a cold storage building to help us with the operations in water and sewer. You'll see more of that coming down relatively soon. Also, the compost program has been very successful. So our plan is to double it in size next year and get the chamber or getting the DDA involved more from a food service. We'd like to get some more partners from the food service side, see how that can work, because that'd be a nice benefit to our business community. Fleet, as the Chief Ball mentioned, we have got vehicles, and we think we get some more vehicles in that are keep electrifying the fleet. But as you know, there's a challenge and recent difficulties with the labor with the big three here. So we're going to see how that works through the system, and we can still pursue what we want to get to meet our needs for electrifying the fleet.
On the fleet, Dave, just real quick. So you're working
Yes.
with a new company now, right? Is that correct? To look for a new company for purchasing vehicles.
Well, we're having discussions with a company that leases vehicles. That we want.
Oh, that's right,
Yeah.
leasing.
So we're see if that can meet our needs and if it makes sense financially.
So I know the one electric vehicle you purchased, you were going to buy an Explorer, but then you found the older Mach-E on the lot.
Correct,
And so you
yes.
swapped it for that, and then we swapped one into admin. So that was good. That was good.
Yeah, and the building, there are two Maverick hybrids, the small pickup trucks. that the 2 building inspectors are driving now, so.
Great.
And it's worked out well. They've been very happy with the performance of those vehicles for inspections, going around town. Here's just some of the capital projects that we're doing, just nothing that, these aren't new. These have been on the books. Wendy's still smiling at me, so that's good.
John had done a lot of the replacement of the HVAC equipment and things like that. So yeah, if we could see the carbon footprint, because I know we put in more
Yes.
efficiency.
Yeah, he is working on the new equipment can provide us data about how much greenhouse gases and carbon footprint. So we'll, once we get somewhere we can make sense of that information to show that we are making a difference, we'll share that. That's all I have. Any questions?
Any questions or comments? No?
Thank you. Looking back at the food composting program.
Yes.
I saw an article recently that said that there were officials from like 18 or 20 different states that were urging the EPA to disallow food waste to go into landfills. And so first, I was wondering if you were aware of that.
Yes.
And secondly, thinking, yes, we need to expand, but we need to pretty drastically expand, I think. And I know it's not till 2040, but we need to educate more, I think, and also try to get businesses on this as well.
Yes.
If it happens, it's going to be pretty drastic for our community, I think.
Yeah, these are pretty good. There's difficult challenges we're going to have to deal with. So I think the community has responded pretty well. Now, it's a small sample size. When we talk about 20,000 homes, we're not looking to have another truck go down the road and pick the stuff up. But we're going to have to come up with some way to collect this material, and
to encourage, home composting too, I think.
that's going to be one of the solutions. Yes, and that comes with its own challenges too. That it's a lot of education.
Yes.
To do it right.
Yes.
And not create a mess. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Well, I'm glad that you know what I'm talking about, because
Yes.
I've been a little worried about it.
Yeah, there's going to be some changes because the whole state law around how solid waste is managed in the state is changing, and there'll be a new plan for Wayne County, a Part 115 plan that we'll learn about more as that comes to fruition over the next 2 years. Hope to get a seat at the table potentially. We'll see.
Thank you.
I know when we go back there, a lot of people always say, hey, where do you get those buckets? How do we get into that? So that's, a lot of people want to get in January. They're ready to jump in. But I think that article you're talking about, so there was like 58% of methane in the landfills comes from food, which is a lot. That's the majority.
Oh, it's substantial.
Hey, Tanya.
So the charging stations, is that distributed between the 24 and 25 budget?
Well, we're going to have some in 24,
Okay.
and then we'll see how those work out and have more in 25.
So have you allocated something for 25 too for that?
Well, potentially we want to allocate anything. We
Okay.
get a turnkey
Because
solution.
it's from the third party.
Yeah. Mhm.
Okay.
There's also a lot of grants also right now, that IRA grant. So hopefully we can catch that cycle.
Yes.
Thank you. Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to
Don't throw it.
I'm going to turn it over to directors Lefevre and Hohenberger, and they are doing a combined presentation.
Thank you. Last year, actually earlier this year, I sat here and got to present the whole thing. Somebody was off donating a kidney, so here we are. So we're splitting the duty today.
Do whatever it takes to get out of these presentations. That's what it was about.
You only have one kidney, Greg.
Yeah. Yeah,
Checked into the liver, but I couldn't get through in time.
he played that card already. Okay, I guess we'll go to full page view. I don't know if it matters or not, but go up, yeah,
I've never.
down full screen mode. There you go. It's just a little bit bigger. There's some numbers on here. So this is the order. We're going to go in through this by fund like we did earlier this year. First up is social services. Pretty self-explanatory. No changes here. I include it because it's one of my favorite funds. It includes our transportation program, as you all know, as well as our contribution to TSA and growth work. So this is it's a worthwhile fund, but it's here. No changes proposed for that one. Economic development, there's been a couple mentions tonight already about some of the increases. Most of those are due to how we reallocated the percentage of our new economic development manager and DDA manager, Gavin, as well as our clerk 4. Their roles were reallocated from the DDA budget into economic development to kind of balance that out. So as a result of that, it's about 78,000 of that 94 is tied to the wages and benefits. And then the other 16,000 are some funds that we put in place for Gavin to be able to do some of those new initiatives that he's looking to add. We've joined a few memberships as a result. Michigan Economic Development Association, he's getting the certification in those things. So some of those things cost a little bit more money, so we've increased there. On the recreation side, we're showing a 3% increase. That's completely tied to wages. We haven't added any new services there. This is just the rising cost of providing the same services that we've got planned for this year and next. And then we do expect, we're always a little more conservative on the revenue side of projecting that. So hopefully we won't see quite the subsidy level, but that's what those numbers include. We do show an increase in revenue, but hopefully we'll be able to continue success with Liberty Fest. That's a big driver for the recreation division. So it's always weather dependent, but we've had a really good track run, and hopefully we can continue that success. This slide got a little loaded. I apologize, but Performing Arts Center, that's the Village Theater. We've got quite a bit of capital, which you saw in Director Norwood's presentation, and then earlier, a lot of mechanical stuff. This building, the theater, we all love it, but it's getting to be almost 20 years old, and like any house or structure, after 20 years, you have to start replacing some major things. And then there's a few staff requests in there as well. I didn't break it down item by item, but I know it is included in the capital list that you received, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about those. Up top, we're decreasing revenue a little bit. The seat sponsorship program isn't quite going how we had hoped it did. We did that during COVID. It was a great opportunity to replace all the seats. You've all been there and seen how great they came out. Staff we're making a renewed effort this fall, and with the holidays coming, to push that seat sponsorship program, so we could all use your help and letting people know that that's available. This time around is a little bit harder. Initially, it was the building was first being built, a lot of excitement around the theater. People they wanted to get their name on the seats. This time a little bit tougher, but what we're seeing is it's going to be more of a gift opportunity for people who are involved in the arts through our performing groups. There's a lot of ownership there at the theater, so it's going to be our target audience. So any help promoting that is appreciated along the way. And then the expenditure side is, again, wages. And then we've had this kind of ongoing challenge with the utilities at the theater. It's gone up and up and up. And so this is kind of a corrective action to help us with the budget and get us where we need to be. We've made adjustments every year along the way. Hopefully we're found, and hopefully some of those capital improvements will help conserve some of our energy costs as well, and not drive us up each year so much. Cable TV, you've all heard for a little bit that those PEG and royalties are coming down a little bit. So the budget projects as such, a little drop in the revenue. And then, of course, the full-time wages and benefits haven't increased. So there's a bit of a drop there, but still covers its cost through our cable fund. So hopefully that will continue. We know that will decline, but hopefully we got quite a few more years before we have to really start worrying about that too much. Then I included the DDA. It's a balanced budget. The DDA board just approved their budget at their last meeting a couple weeks ago. That was the 24, just in preparation to be included in this budget so that you had an accurate number. The 25 hasn't been set yet, but as you see there, it's showing a contribution back to their fund balance. So the DDA continues to put money away in their fund balance to prepare for the Boulevard project. So that continues to be the plan there. Lastly, before I turn it over to Greg, is the CLS admin account. This is where a lot of our full-time staff wages on the central services side are included. Nothing real significant here, just a small drop. We've got money budgeted for the community survey next year, so we'll be doing that as we've done in the past. And we've got some park planning dollars incorporated in there as well. The reason there's a drop for 25 is because we don't have any of those funds planned, but in 26 we'll need to come back to the board and ask for funds to renew our our master plan, our departmental master plan. So you'll see that in 26, but otherwise pretty well flat there.
Give Chris a run for his money here with this here. So seeing what we can do, Chris. Parks budget is in my area of the leisure services. We really focused on keeping everything kind of in talking with our finance department, keeping everything at a 3% increase or lower. The Parks Department is not there between the 2024 and 2025 budget overall for the subsidy level at the bottom line. Really the primary driver of that from 24 to 25, as you remember earlier this year, we added 2 new full-time parks positions to the Parks Department, bringing us to 12, which has been extremely helpful. But they were not included in the original 2024 budget, which is what we're comparing to here. So the part of our increase in the numbers that Wendy showed in the 2024 amended was the increase there, but we're comparing to the original budget that you saw last year. So when we compare that, it does show a fairly significant increase, and that's why you see that 8% increase. But those were for positions that we already approved. And then these expenditures, the revenue and expenditures up top that you see don't include the capital expenditures. Those were mainly the operating expenditures. So down below is an additional $688,000. These are all CIP capital improvement items that are in the 5-year capital improvement plan. Splash pad feature upgrades, which as the splash pad is aging, some new trucks, adding a restroom to Freedom Park instead of Porta Johns, which would be a nice upgraded feature there. We kind of have that in our future plan for parks, is to every few years add a permanent restroom to parks so that we can out using as many Porta Johns for our users. Heritage ball field irrigation, so that's for the 3 original fields at Heritage Park to the new ball field that we put in a couple of years ago with our with the help of GCYBSA. They helped fund putting in the irrigation system there, and we put in the infrastructure so everything would be large enough for irrigation of the original 3 ball fields. So this is just putting in the additional piping for the 3 original ball fields there. Independence Park restroom remodel, some upgrades at Bartlett Travis House, and Park parking lot.
Now, where would the pocket parks be in there? Pocket parks at all in the budget?
So we talked about those. So we have some money in the ARPA funding that we talked about that is available. Wendy and I discussed that has gone unspent so far. It's $426.
There's about $470,000 left from
about
the ARPA funding for
$470,000.
pocket parks in the community improvement fund right now, set aside.
Okay, so we'll.
Right. It's in the fund balance available. I don't think anybody included an actual budget figure until we know what we're doing for those. But there
Correct.
is money set aside, and you'll see that when we get back to my presentation, about $470,000 in fund balance for that purpose that the board has set aside.
There were a few other items in the board goals from earlier this year, again, while I was off playing hooky, that were, I think it was pocket parks, the summit planning for the feasibility study, and trail expansion that we had, Wendy and I had discussed those recently, and we had discussed those earlier this week about in January, there's plans for a kind of a fund balance study session, and would show the impact of if those things were put into the 2025 budget, what that would do to the overall fund balance. So then at that time can make the decision that yes, in fact, we do want to put those into the 2025 budget at that time, or we want to put one of those things, two of those things, or all three of those things. Considering the ARPA funds that we already have, or other factors and other board priorities, before we just put everything in, so that you can kind of see the overall impact of the fund balance. Is that all correct from what we discussed, Wendy?
Yeah, I was gonna cover that, and probably in a more financial explanation when we get back to my stuff. So that's the.
That was the non-financial way of saying it. Sports Center, as you can see, the overall increase is about 2% here. Just two minor CIP items, dugout expansion, and then electrical infrastructure, as that is a aged facility for sure. Summit on the Park, this is a 1% increase, so staying pretty flat. Total increase is only $10,000. And then a number of CIP items here, carpeting, flooring for the aerobics, audio system, building audio. This will help with communication throughout the building to make announcements, those sorts of things. A variety of other items that are also included in the capital items that were sent out to the board as well. Yes.
So where is the, we talked about the summit restructuring and expanding. We had this conversation. Is this in 2025 we start, or 2026? At the beginning of the year we discussed this. Where is that being?
So we had discussed a couple of options with that. We talked about potentially starting that in 2024. We looked at, the original plan was 2025, so we're looking at 2025, but that is going to be included in the items that we're going to look at in January when Wendy does that financial impact on the overall fund balance.
Right, at the budget workshop that we did immediately following the last study session, the board had talked about putting the study together, like the architecture work, in 25, the $200,000 was set aside for 25, and then the $2 million was kind of earmarked for 26, and an additional $2 million in 27. The $200,000 currently is not in the 25 budget, but what we, I'll just get to this part right now. There's a number of items that will show you when we get back to my slides from that workshop that are included. I kind of have it broken out between the budget, the board workshop items that are included in the budget, the ones that are not included in the budget currently, and then kind of the ones from 26 and 27 that are on our radar screen to be in consideration for the future. When you start to look at the general fund balance, if we were to have put the $4 million for the summit renovations into the 25 budget, our fund balance at the end of 25 would have been budgeted at about the 15%, at what the very minimum fund balance you can have without the state triggering a state issue.
I am talking about, not the entire thing would not be allocated in 25, right?
Correct, but I guess where I was going is I think we need to have board decisions to make sure you're comfortable with where the funding level is going to be and looking at the 5-year plan. So in January, we're going to actually have a 5-year plan kind of projecting out where fund balance is going to be over the 5 years. Here's the things that are currently in the budget. Here's some more of the board priorities that aren't in the budget, and to talk about, do we want these in the budget? When do you want these in the budget? And how are we going to fund these items if they're in the budget? And we're going to do that in January.
In January.
Yeah, yeah, in
Are
early
we
January, we're going to do that.
Just including like what board items are we talking
Well, I have slides to show, but the one specifically that was brought up right now, the summit one has not yet been, the $200,000 for the summit that the board in April had said, let's start that in 25, is not currently in the 25 budget. We're not adopting the 25 budget right now, we're just kind of presenting it. So if the board wants that in the budget before we adopt it, it's gonna be in the budget before we adopt it for 200,000, but we just want to kind of show the 5-year projections as to where we think things are heading, because we know right now, and I'm sure Victor will speak about this when he gets there, the ERP system that's allocated is coming in over budget as well. The parking lot that, you need to renovate is coming in, I think, double, I think about $2 million over budget as well. So there's a number of things decisions we have to make.
about? Are we discussing those 2 items at the January
Yes.
discussion as well?
Yeah,
That's good to know.
yeah. So this is just the plan. And again, we'll do the 5-year plan, and if there's these items that the board feels important to add to the budget, we will definitely add those before we ask the board to adopt that in 25.
Thank you. Pheasant Run Golf Club. This one is also a decrease. So we're decreasing the subsidy level for the operations, not including the capital as well, which is fairly significant for 2025. Clubhouse upgrades, a lot of machinery here for maintaining the course, bridge work, and then the parking lot in 2025 also. So that's a big one there. And then Fellows Creek it's a 19% increase in not the subsidy, but how much they contribute back, because they actually do contribute back to us for the operations of that, not including their depreciation and those sorts of things that have to be included in the Gulf Enterprise Fund. And then a variety of equipment capital as well for the facility, and a lot of machinery equipment there to operate that building. Tow behind blower, ice machine, sidewinder. That's exciting to get a new sidewinder. I had to ask what that was. That's for mowing on the side of hills and kind of the side of bunkers and those sorts of things. Questions that you didn't ask already?
Yeah, that we didn't ask. Great job, thanks.
Back there, you're up.
Yes, this is. Oops.
Thank you, Greg. I want to make sure I promote the summit. I have a vision of what's going to be. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. The last time ITI came before you, I wasn't here. So my able applications development manager deputized very well for me, and I'm very grateful. Thank you also for not peppering her with a lot of questions, and she came out unscathed. I also want to thank the finance department for helping me out through this process, because this is the first time I'm coming before you to do this. And I hope I'm not going to keep you here. I put myself on a timer, so. All right. The ITI 2025 budget expenditure, as you can see here, it tells a picture of two halves, if I may call it that way. You have 37% of expenditure going towards capital outlay, another 37% going towards salaries. You have a 16% going towards software support. You have 4% of professional services and a few other things that occupy the 6%. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this breakdown. It's giving you a total of about 3.4 million in total. On the professional service, that includes things like printer maintenance, phone systems, server support, networking support, something that we call know before, that we use for social engineering and those annoying emails that you get trying to trick you to do stuff. I spill the bean now, but it's for a good purpose. As much as it annoys you, it's for a good purpose. On the software, we have things like Microsoft Office 365, the Barracuda email archive system. We have a firewall, InformaCast, a Vim that we use for backup, DocuSign, Civic Plus, antivirus, SolarWind that we use for ticketing system. Again, like I mentioned earlier on, capital outlay, I'm going to talk more about it in the coming slides. The category of other includes things like internet expenses, training, conference supplies, and things that we spend on fleet, as well as a few minor contingencies. Now, because this is the first time I'm coming before you, I want to take a broad look at things. So if you look at the slide here, it's giving you a few comparisons from 2022 up until 2025, so you can get a good picture of what's going on in ITI. Of course, as I mentioned earlier on, salaries and fringes, you can see employee step up and cost of living accounts for the increase that you see there. Professional services, we had a few things going on with our phone project. We're projecting to do some work in 2024 for telephones. It's actually the start of the work, but while the actual work will happen in 2025. Software, we are projecting as well to do some work with Adobe Acrobat, and that moves on as well to 2025. Again, if you take a look at what's going on in capital outlay, I'll talk a little bit about it some more in a few coming slides. We do have a few things going on with the contingency, as had been alluded to by Wendy in her comment not too long ago. We have an earmark of $1 million for ERP replacement. That won't be encumbered in 2023. So it's a little bit difficult to kind of budget the actuals, all right? And I'll discuss a little bit more on that. But keep in mind that we have a board study session coming up shortly on everything ERP. So you might want to just pencil your questions for that session, because in that session we're going to talk in depth about everything ERP. Now, a lot of things that you see here are informed by what we call the ITI initiatives, and those initiatives are represented in our CIP. Some of these things we've already started. We have the network switch replacement. By 2025, we'll be in our phase 3. We started phase one in 2023. We have a total of 60 switches that are old and end of life. So we are really working hard to replace all of them so that they can reduce the security risk that they pose. By 2025, we are projecting to spend around 250,000. That will get us somewhere around 20 of those switches with all the licenses and everything that accompanies it. We're also projecting to do some work on website reorganization, and I'll talk a little bit more about this one as well. Heritage Park Fiber Ring, we're projecting to spend about 200,000 in 2025 on that. Phone system upgrade, about 150,000. Wireless access point upgrades, 100,000, 110,000. Cybersecurity, 100,000. Replacement computer workstations, 100,000. ITI training room refresh, 70,000. Ricoh copier, 40,000 for a total of $1.27 million. I want to talk a little bit more on some of these individual items I just went through. Website CMS reorganization. Currently, we are paying somewhere around 110,000 for everything that is under the umbrella of our website. And you can see the different elements of what we call the web CMS. These are the different items. Now, if we decide to bring in a whole bunch of other things that we anticipate to bring in, things like, C-Click Fix, as we've often talked about, and Civic Clerk, that will allow you to manage, board meetings very well, then we are projecting that it will cost us additional with the implementation cost that comes with it. And so we are projecting that perhaps around 250,000, and for this we definitely have to do an RFP so that we can see what else can do what we want it to do. Let me talk a little bit about the virtual environment and how that ties into other things that we do as well. Again, this is part of our CIP as we are projecting. If you look on the left kind of represents as is today. We have some footprint at DPW, but that doesn't represent a true picture of redundancy build out for the township. What you have in the admin SAN, that's the storage array network. If you all remember when we had the flood and then the tornado, at some point the whole thing kind of collapsed over here and we lost everything here in the township. We want to make sure that we build a redundant system whereby should anything happen, we should still be okay functioning and providing service to the township. In 2024, there are a few items there in our CIP that will allow us to better prepare for things like that. And then in 2025, we will finalize that. Now, connectivity as it relates to the same, if you look on the right, you see that we have a proposed ring. Now, pay attention to the connections between the Summit Building and Pheasant Run Golf Course. You have that in blue, and also the Public Safety Building going to Fire Station 1. You have that in blue. And also going from Fire Station 1 to Fleet Building, you have that in blue. That represents a 30-year-old fiber line. That's a single mode. And there is no redundancy to that. Many times, as some of you, the MSD folks are gone from here today, anytime I see a digging truck out there, I lose my mind. I go, scream, stop. Normally, the protocol warrants that before you start digging, you go contact Ms. Dig, and that will tell you where these fibers are. But, they're now doing a good job of calling it out. But chances are, if we have one cut in it, that all those buildings will disappear. They will have no connectivity. And so we are proposing that in 2025, we'll build a true ring so that if something happens to any of those, then the route of the traffic will go the opposite way and will remain we continue to do business as usual.
Are those also going to be in conduit so you can just pull the fiber through versus trenching all that up again?
That is absolutely correct. So we bring it up to par and up to standard because it's now going to be through a standardized conduit. Okay. I talked a little bit about the phone system. Now, the current solution that we have, we put that in place somewhere around 2018, and it cost us somewhere around 297,000 to put it in place. It's a hodgepodge system that is working very well. The equipment, the devices that that we use for our phone system is excellent. They are Cisco products. They are excellent. But the underlying system itself is kind of giving us a little hiccup. And so not only that, it has gotten to about 7 years because we put it in 2018. The solution itself is beginning to show us signs of weakness. Every so often it goes down and we go back and we, baby it up, bring it back up. It's crucial to remember as well that this is the system that also includes the non-911 emergency phone lines. If you remember, when the flood came and the tornado came, there was a time when 911 the calls were just bombarded. Now, the non-911 line, these are non-911 line, but they are emergency lines. These are the lines that the businesses use to contact the police department in case they have emergency. These are the lines that the banks dial direct. Those are also affected by this system that goes up and down. So we really cannot afford to have a system that is, like this. And so we're proposing that we will go out to bid, be able to provide another solution that is hosted, that will no longer be dependent on any deficiency that we may have here in terms of whether we have power or no power. But we can retain the phone device by themselves. And we are proposing to spend, I believe, about 150,000 on that in 2025. Prior to that, we will engage a consultant, and you see that cost in 2024 to be able to identify what kind of solution that will fit our environment. Now, I want to talk about cybersecurity. When I got here, there were a few priorities set before me, and I looked at that, and I also looked at the fact that we had done IT strategic plan in previous years. Then we decided to reprioritize a few things. And so cybersecurity now, we are now at a place where we can comfortably begin to look at our cybersecurity posture. We haven't done anything. In 2024, we are planning to do an initial assessment. And after that assessment, we are planning to then begin mitigation and then setting ourselves to work with a plan that we are going to abide by. Cybersecurity is not something that you do one day and you say, yeah, I'm done, let's go. No, it's something that you get into a plan and you get on with the program and you stay with it. And so we see the cost represented. There should be an RFP, or unless we are able to buy through a state contract. But it's something that is crucial for us. So again, we expect to start this work in 2024 and then roll it over to 2025. Now, I want to talk about ERP. I know we set aside $1 million. We put out the RFP. As you know, this is just more or less like a quick informational thing. I know I'm going to do a study session on this so you can get up to speed on everything ERP. But we did the RFP. We had like about 7 vendors respond. 3 of them gave us a solution that is somewhat full package or complete ERP. And then the rest of them are like best of breed. Now, after reviewing all that with the consultant as well as the committee, we elected to interview or bring back 3 of them for demonstration. That demo is going to start from next week, and we are going to go through all the demo, and then at the end of the demo, we'll be able to vote on something that will represent what we want. based on the initial cost that they've given us, again, we have the $1 million set aside. And like I said earlier on, we will talk more in details about that in the study session. I'm running through this. I want to make sure I remind you of the ITI team that has quite a lot of tasks in front of them. Again, this ITI team, in terms of salary, represents that 34% of IT's budget. All the names that you see here, you know some of them. I'm not going to read through them, but I want to point out something. Currently, we have a vacant position. We hired somebody for applications specialist. It didn't work out well, and she resigned. And we are going to be posting the position next week. And we're looking forward to getting somebody to fill that position. Also, given the fact that we have quite a lot to deal with, you might see me coming back to beg you for additional position. Just a plug-in on that. I think I did okay with my timer here. Any question for me? Yes.
The $40,000.
No, they're not just for the mailroom. They account for RICO $40,000.
That was the 25.
Yes. Copier replacement. So every single one of them, they are on. I can't remember exactly which one it is now, but they're all on a schedule because we didn't acquire every single one of them at the same time. So I can get back to you whether it's the mailroom or not.
Okay.
Mailroom RICO experiencing challenge, or would you want to replace that?
No, I was just
Okay.
curious. We acquired them in 2017.
Okay. All right.
Where they were at on the list.
Where they are on the list?
Or if they were going to be replaced. I know we waited to
Can
replace the
prohibit
RICOs last time until the
it.
It's too expensive.
Yeah.
It was cheaper to replace them than it was.
There is a schedule, if that's what you're asking. There is a schedule. Unless something dies in between during that schedule, then the warranty covers that.
Okay.
Questions?
So I think this is a question more for Wendy. I'm looking at the 2024 capital projects, and there there's a Heritage Park fiber ring for 200,000, and in this sheet also there's one for 2025. So I'm just wondering, is it like a 400,000 of total cost? It's broken down between 2 years?
Are you talking about from my presentation?
Yes.
Initially, there was $200,000 put into the budget for 24, and it was removed from 24
And gone in
and
25.
put
Oh,
into
going to
25.
25, okay.
Correct. Yeah.
And for the network switch replacements, is that like a, because in this one also I saw 250,000, and here also there is a 250,000.
They're doing, I believe,
20
Victor can speak to
staggered.
that. There's a phased approach.
There's a phased approach, okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's all I.
Okay.
Great. Thank
right.
you, Victor. Great
Thank
job.
you.
Victor? All right, are you guys still good to keep going? Does anybody need a 5-minute break before I get back into mine?
No?
I'm good.
Okay.
I mean, if we keep going, that means we'll go fast because somebody might need a break, so. All right. We will circle back and finish up mine. Pull it all together. Oops.
having IT technical difficulties. IT anymore. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and try to pull everything together to kind of talk what the story is now with all these items that all of the different directors talked about and their priorities. I think I don't have a lot of detail to go back over with this. So the 25 capital projects, I sent you this. I wasn't planning on going over this one by one. The different directors talked about their specific areas. I guess I didn't talk to the clerk or treasurer about this if they want to talk about it. Clerk has just a really small capital item in here, a Dimos library for $2,500 of capital, and then I guess maybe the treasurer doesn't. Then there's also an election security upgrades for $15,000 that wasn't previously talked about. So there's questions or the clerk would like to speak to that, I will open the door. Otherwise, I'll move on.
Summit on the park staff and leisure services to determine that we will not need to spend $15,000 at the summit, and we will need to spend some money at the Village Arts Factory. And so we had initially asked, and the board had kind of initially approved in a work session up to $30,000 for election security upgrades. IMO labels are for printing the labels on
That's that. Otherwise, all the other capital was already discussed from the other directors. So the total non-public safety capital is at the bottom of the screen is about $7.5 million that we have included in the budget for 2025 currently. Public safety, both directors, Baugh and Stockline spoke to theirs. The fire total capital outlay included in the budget for 25 is $994,000. Police is $375,000, and the 911 fund has about $90,000. So the total public safety capital is about $1.5 million. I included this slide just to kind of give you an idea of the different debt issuances that are currently outstanding. I know it's been asked in the past kind of when the debt falls off the books. The only debts that we still have on the books are related to the 2020. We still have, I think, a water bond on the books, but then 2020 capital bond that we just issued for the big CIP projects is the other one that's outstanding there. So there was a big one that we had that the last payment was in 23 for about a $2 million a year payment for the existing CIP or capital that we had done 20 years ago. That just fell off this year, so that's good news. So the overall revenues by fund is on this slide. $5 million, $35.3 million to $36.6 million. That's an increase of about $1.3 million. That $1.3 million is made up mostly of the property taxes of $450,000, and state charge revenue is up by about $510,000. One thing that we've historically been able to subsidize our general fund by getting a transfer from the cable fund of about $800,000 per year because of the franchise fee revenue. That's unrestricted funds. It doesn't have to be spent on cable. And historically, the township has been able to subsidize, like I said, the general fund budget by that. Because the franchise fee revenues are so drastically decreasing with the streaming, that $800,000 transfer we have had since forever that I've been here has had to go down to $400,000 a year because the cable fund itself to pay for its own salaries and operating expenses needs the rest of that. So that was basically cut in half, and that probably will not rebound unless something drastic happens.
Yeah, that's the one bill that's before the Senate now in terms of the streaming services, which are fighting.
Right. So that's important to note. There we're losing a revenue stream there that probably won't be coming back. The roads fund, the property taxes in the roads fund is up $400,000, and you can see the roads fund revenue totally went up by $400,000. The fire fund's up by about $800,000, directly related to property taxes. Same thing with the police fund. The police fund revenue is went from $28.5 million to $29.7 million, all due to property taxes. $5.4 million, so that's down about $500,000. That's really a result of the general fund. So the transfers in from general fund to subsidize their budget is going down because the capital that they need or that they're requesting for 25 has gone down from 24. So I think their operating revenues have gone up slightly for 25, but their transfer from the general fund has decreased.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just for the general fund, could you just talk to us about why it went from 22 actual of 43.2 to 23, you're looking at 34.1? What is the big drop there?
That's when the ARPA funds came in. So we had the $8 million hit in 22 because we quote unquote used it for governmental services. So we had to put it into the general fund, and then afterwards we moved it out of the general fund to earmark it separately.
Are we doing the same for these funds that are coming in from the state right now?
The state money is recorded in the so part of the money from the state would hit the roads fund because part of it went to Canton Center Road.
Mm-hmm. But then
The ASR money we have not received yet, so it has not been recorded anywhere. We'll put it in the infrastructure, this capital projects for infrastructure.
okay, that same line item.
Yeah. What's going to go in here? Currently, the money is sitting in there for the 50% we receive for the parks and trails, and the remaining money from the roads that we could not use for Canton Center that's transferring over will hit that fund as well. But we can't record that as revenue until we spend the money. So as soon as we kind of have the plan for what we're going to spend those funds on, we'll do a budget adjustment to gross up the revenue and gross up the expenses at that point in time. But that'll hit that fund. Going down, street lighting fund, again, we're kind of a pass-through from DTE to some neighborhoods for the street lights, where instead of DTE having to bill individual homeowners, the Treasurer's Department is going through and billing individual homeowners for the street lights in the neighborhood. So that's just strictly a pass-through. We bill the residents what we're supposed to be getting billed from DTE. So that's the revenue from them paying us, which we use to pay DTE. Cable TV fund, we've talked about. Community improvement fund, again, so you can see it had a big, large $10 million increase. That's when we transferred the money from the general fund to community improvement fund for the ARPA dollars to set aside for the board priorities. So that's where that money went. Normally, again, and then 2021 and 22, we had $2 to $3 million in there, and then it dropped in 24 to 600,000. We transferred money from the general fund to pay the debt payment. 23 is the last year we had the debt payment, so then therefore that revenue decreased because we're not transferring the money to cover a debt. Property taxes, Indigent Defense Fund, we are the fiduciary for the 35th District Court. That's the revenue we get from the grant to help pay for the defense. 911 Service Fund, that's the dispatch fees that we get. The Organized Crime Enforcement, this is a fiduciary that we help. They basically pay us and to pass through expenses for them to pay rent for a building. Fund, we're just estimating that we're going to get $400,000 for CDBG. We don't have these numbers yet from them to verify what those actual revenues are. Once we actually get our allocation, we'll settlement fund, again, we have $29,000 for 24, and then we have $87,000 for 25. That we spoke about a little while ago. Kate, you had asked that difference between the 29 and that 87 is the transfer in from the police fund to help cover the costs. Energy project debt service fund, this is just transfers in from other funds to help pay for the debt for the energy project that we did back in 13. That should be paid off, so that should go away. Capital projects debt service fund, those are our debt payments for the new 2020 bond we issued. Got the golf course fund, went from $5.8 million of revenue to 6.2, so that's going up about $400,000. That's mostly due to the increase in the green fees. However, there is some operating transfers, I believe, went up about $100,000 to account for some increased capital in the golf course fund for 25. Water and sewer funds, pretty steady. That budget's a little, that revenue is going to be based on what our expenses we think are going to come in at, based on, we budget to increase the expenses to Gliwa and to Watua by, 3% by some minor amount. But once we actually have established what those fees are going to increase by, as you know, we come to the board usually in April with a suggested revenue rate that we get, and that's how our revenue is based. So this revenue is almost a plug figure just to kind of balance out what we think our expenses are going to be. We true those up when we actually have a better idea where our expenses are going to come in. Garbage and rubbish collection, this is a big increase. So this is $1.4 million. And I'm not sure how much we've talked about this with the full board. Dave alluded to it earlier that tomorrow our RFPs are due back for the garbage and waste collection. Based on what has come in at other communities, our public works manager is concerned that those bids are going to come back at like 40% increase. We know that there's been a couple communities where people have come back and it has been flat, but that has not been the norm apparently. So that increase is just an estimation of where we think we could end up based on the results of our RFP. More to come on that as soon as we have those open and we actually see what's coming. What that would be, so it would be a 40% increase if it came to fruition, what he's estimating. 40% would go up, I believe it was in August. I think our current contract goes through July. So that means the fees would actually go up in August of 24. It'd go from 4.8 to 5.8, so we'd have about 5 months of it at a 40% increase, and then in 25 we'd have a full year of that increase. So you really look at it, if you go from about 4.8 to 7.2 million, that's a pretty drastic increase. So more to come on that. Hopefully
Yeah.
it's a worst case scenario and it doesn't come to that, but
Right, and we'll have to figure out maybe how we can do some more smoothing also.
we're looking to see what options we might have. All of the funds who have fleet vehicles pay into this to help cover the costs of the fleet, to help pay the costs of the employees, and to help pay the costs of the work that is done on the vehicles. So this is just revenue coming from the other funds to help cover the costs of maintaining the vehicles. And then the post-employment benefits fund, this again is very similar to internal service. All of the funds who have employees, who have retirees that they have to fund, they all contribute to this fund, and then we pay the medical costs for the current retirees out of here, and this is where we pay the $1 million pre-funding out of for the OPEB. On the expenditure side, this chart really just kind of shows a breakdown of all of the total budget that we spend, kind of how it's been allocated. And if you see the different allocations and the different line items, they're pretty consistent. So the bottom, the light, all right, this bottom light blue is the general fund. So you can see from 2020 through 2024, 2025, we are
kind of low and 20 and 21 at 19 to 20%. COVID year, our expenses were kind of down at those years. But we've been anywhere from the 20 to 25% range in there. We're pretty consistent with how we've been spending. Same thing with public safety, business, police, and fire. They've ranged on the low end to 24%, the high end of 32%. And that makes sense because they didn't, during 2020 and 2021. Sorry. I will talk
Speak
into
into the
I'm
microphone.
sorry, I thought I was. This is really hard. In 2020 and 2021, it makes sense that they are, we're at the 32% mark here, just because the rest of the workforce was on furlough days for a couple days a week on the work share program when we were closed during COVID. So it makes sense that they had a higher percentage at that point in time. But really, everybody's been pretty consistent as far as, where we're spending the majority of our money or the percentages of it. Same chart, same exact information, just in a pie chart format.
So you saw the capital, we're spending a lot in fixing things.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, in 2023, that's where we had the majority of our capital expenses for the 2020 bond were expensed here. I'm sorry. Thank you. In the CIP.
CIP.
Correct. So here, this is the actual increases and decreases in expenditures by fund, and I thought it might be easier to kind of look at it this way versus the chart like we looked at the revenues for the general fund with all the individual line items. So the general fund expenses for 2025 are actually going down by $890,000. That's a result for the transfers out to the community center for 2025 is actually going down $650,000. Also, the $950,000 that we have set aside for the ERP is obviously we're planning to spend that for 2024. We have some extra capital that we are spending, but overall our expenses are going down primarily as a result of reduced capital spending in 25 that this general fund would be subsidizing. The roads fund budget is going down by $860,000. That again is just a projection of based on what capital projects they are planning on spending the money on that year. That could change depending on where the costs come in at for the actual projects and what projects the board decides to move forward with for that point in time. Fire fund went down $753,000. Their capital outlay actually decreased $1.2 million. And we talked about that. It was for the equipment that was coming in 24. But I think their salaries and wages are actually increasing by about $200,000. And then their other services are increasing by about $300,000. Director Stockline alluded to this already as well. The police fund expenses are going up, a little drastic compared to all the other funds if you look at it that way. So police fund expenses are going up by about $2.1 million. Salaries, wages, and fringes of that are 1.7. So, again, Director Baugh alluded to the fact that with the incentives that were given and the letter of agreement and the contract we just signed, it's a pretty big increase. Now, we know that we're still in negotiations with fire, so some of the fire stuff can change as well come 2025. But that accounts for the most significant increase there. The community center and golf are combined here. I'll get into that maybe a little bit more on the next slide, but again, Greg had already spoken about this. Overall, those expenses had decreased by about $114,000. Community center actually decreased by $500,000 as a result of capital decreasing. The golf increased by almost $400,000 due to capital increasing in golf. So, capital improvement fund, that's a community improvement in the capital fund. Again, that's just CIP related. Capital has decreased. Water and sewer fund has decreased by about $862 because of less capital. Garbage and rubbish collections we just spoke about. We're anticipating those costs to go up. And then the other are the rest of the funds, which I'll get into on this next slide. So this next slide, I'm not going to get into a lot of it, but I'll highlight here the community center fund
The expenses were decreasing, like I alluded to on the previous slide, but it was combined with the golf. These expenses went down by $500,000 from 5.9 to 5.4 million due to capital, going down to golf. Golf increased from 6.4 to 6.8 in relation to capital as well. These other funds that were kind of included on that last column, they're really a lot of the same funds that we've talked about. Cable TV's a big one right here to look at. Their expenses are going from 2.4 to 1.3. That's because we're doing so much capital in using cable funds in 24 that we're using less of those in 25. The rest of these funds, when you kind of skim down, they're pretty similar. I wasn't going to go into a lot of explanations on any of these unless you guys have specific questions. Okay. All right, so projected fund balance. So again, this is worst case scenario. This is assuming that we actually use all the budget that we have, that the board has approved to spend in 23, same thing in 24, and what we would be asking for in 25. The fund balance for the general fund at the end of 25 would be about $8.8 million. Roads fund 7.1. I mean, you can read all these. Fire fund is 6.6, police is 8.1, and so on and so forth. So the good news is they're all positive. That's very good news. Police and fire fund balance percentages are about each of them are about 30% fund balance level. But you really need to combine the general fund and community center fund as one, because for all intents and purposes, that community center is considered a general fund. It's unrestricted. The funds are unrestricted in nature. And of course, their fund balance here is $26,000. You would never, that fund balance there is what, 1%? Something very small. So when you combine the general fund and the community center fund with these budgets that we are proposing, the fund balance would end up being about 19% fund balance for general fund.
And that's in 20.
That's in 25. So it's starting to get, I mean, we don't want to get to the minimum fund balance level. But again, this is budgeting the worst case scenario. If you look at this next slide, when you actually look at what we have historically budgeted to use a fund balance and what we historically actually have used, so this first column for all of these, the general, fire, and police, is what we have budgeted to use. And what we actually use a fund balance is this column, and the difference is here. Our actual differences for the general fund have been significantly conservative. So for that trend I would actually anticipate that trend to continue. Maybe not to this $8 to $9 million mark, but I don't expect it to be really at 19%. But you can see for all the funds, we have budgeted conservatively and actually come in better. Which brings me to the point of, well, let me keep going. This is the amount of money remaining in fund balance in the community improvement fund for the different priorities that the board had identified. So there's still $1 million set aside for the Ridge Road, ZB West Park. We haven't spent that yet. We still have about $470,000, just shy of that, for pocket parks. And we have about $500,000 that the board had set aside for future priorities. So we still have those funds set aside.
Where would the million from
Where's that?
yeah, where's that shown at?
That is shown $4.7 million in this community improvement fund. We purposely set it aside there so it wouldn't be set with the general fund and get confused with other dollars. Pocket parks, that 4.7 million, yep, the 1 million, the 4.7, and that $500,000 are all part of that 4.7. Yep. No, in order to make sure we didn't have issues with the ARPA requirements, we used officially and filed our paperwork that we used them for government services, which meant the definition. So we now call these funds internally NARPA funds. They're no longer ARPA funds, but we're setting them aside as ARPA. So we don't want to call them ARPA to confuse them that we have these spending guidelines. So we're calling them NARPA, not ARPA. So if you hear me say NARPA, that's why I call it that. But it is set aside.
Weird word.
Well, you know, we do live it up.
They added it in.
I mean, we know how to party. All right, so these were the items from the board goal workshops that are currently included in either the 24 or 25 budget. And these were the years that they were broken down in. So the elections items are included in there. The CAD licenses for MSD are included in there. The EV planning was already part of the 23 budget. Pavement plans is included. The completion of the RRC certificate, the 200,000 for the rec room at the summit, $30,000 is in there for the planning for pocket parks for 24. Actually, there's another, I think there's another $30,000 or $40,000 in 25's budget as well for pocket parks, 45,000 in there. The GIS position has been filled. The dispatch reorg is built into the budget. The strategic planning for fire is built into their budget. And then the water and sewer items as far as creating the assistant for GIS and then moving the GIS position to ITI. Probably more importantly that you guys would want to see is what was not included. So the renovation of the break room for the employees is currently not in, is not in the 24 budget. I know that I had been working with Treasurer Slavens on trying to come up with some sort of a plan, and we're still looking at it, but there's been no dollar anything assigned to that yet for the budget for that. Pre-funding of the pension plan is not included. The additional $333,000 for any of these three main funds has not been allocated to the budget. There is the $600,000 that the police fund is paying, but that has been there for a while. That was different from the $300,000 that the board had previously said to put in there. Oops, the CAD licenses are actually in here twice. I believe all those two are actually already currently included in the plan. The pocket parks. So I had in my notes that we were going to do an extra $100,000 a year, so $500,000 total over 5 years for the pocket parks. The extra $100,000 is not included in the budget yet for 2025. The expansion of the trails is not currently in there for $100,000. Summit renovations for $200,000 is not in here. And then I had this added to my note for 2 swing sets for Michael that we talked about there, but I understand that maybe those are supposed to be worked into future parks. So there's nothing. So I didn't take it out yet because I hadn't
don't know who took these notes. I can't speak to these notes.
I think.
Reminding you, Mike.
But I do remember John did indicate that they are working these swing sets into the park development budget on an annual basis. To be fair, I will not be doing the swinging.
You will not be what?
I will not be sitting on the swings.
You will not be sitting. Oh, well.
I think they're fun.
We can have adult swings. Adults like to swing.
Right.
But if directed by the board, I can remove this from the
So
from the workshop
Well,
items.
it sounds like
looks like you did.
Well, no, we were working on
$0 allocated.
we were working on getting costs, to be fair, and I did not have the cost, so I still had it as a placeholder.
But
Maybe Michael could help build them.
that's right. That's right.
Get
You got the fire
labor in
department to
there.
sit Pre-funding, I mean, that was extra pre-funding over what we're already doing. Is that correct?
We are not pre-funding anything other than the police fund has been pre-funding.
I thought we were always
That has been for the retiree health care, not the pensions.
doing. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, because that's already been worked into the budget. Yeah, these were different items. So then, I think we got through here. So then the staffing for Fire Station 4 also has not been worked into that budget yet for the fire department. The placemakers, these were the other items, and I will send out a listing to all of the trustees, all of these in one paper, so you can see them all together on one slide, kind of what, what all the items were, and I'll add a column for what was included and what was not included yet on a different slide, so it's easier for you to see. I had to try to summarize this to get it on a PowerPoint that was legible. So
Right.
I'll get all that out to the board so you can see that.
All right, thanks.
But these were the items for 26 and 27 that aren't on here because we haven't done the 26 or 27 budgets yet. I don't know that we have to go through all these, but again, the 100,000 a year for the pocket parks, the trails, the summer renovations, and then the board had allocated an extra $3 million for the 4th fire station, just anticipating extra costs on top of what we were trying to get the grant funding for. There's some new equipment that we'll need to actually, have vehicles coming out of the 4th fire station, and then the staffing as well. So kind of our next steps is we're going to ask the board on the 28th to adopt the 2024 budget. But before that meeting starts, last year, a year ago, I think it was at this point in time, we were working on the priority-based budgeting, which is a board goal from 22. All the departments put a lot of effort and work into that process by identifying all the programs that they work on, taking their line items from these budgets. So these thick budgets that we sent to you, the staff had to assign every single line item to a program and say how much of that line item went to which specific programs. After that program, after they allocated the cost to all these programs, they identified the programs, put them in the software, put the costs associated to it, they had to score it, and they had to score those against the board goals. Kind of some standard things in the industry, like, is the demand increasing? Can other people perform this work? There's kind of some standard things that you scored them against, and then you scored them against the board goals. And once all those things were scored against all of these specific items, the individual departments scored their own, and then there was a peer group. And then a peer group had to look at those and say, did they agree with the departments or do they disagree with the departments? And if they disagreed with the departments, they talked to the departments, but the peer group's score is the one that stuck. And so we've gotten to the point now where we've uploaded the 24 budget into this priority-based budgeting software based on the budget that was presented today for 24. We're not talking 25 yet, we're talking about 24. The staff, in case there's new line items to the budget, some of the programming might have changed, we're asking the staff to update those, but we want to show those results to you on the 28th. There'll be a study session at 6 o'clock. We're going to have an individual from ResourceX, who's the company that we use, who's going to come and kind of walk you through how, what the process was, to give you a little bit more explanation, how to interpret the results, because it's really a guide. Everybody's estimating what costs for the budget are going into each program. It's not an exact science, so it's really just kind of a guide. And I think he's going to walk you through how to interpret them, how to use them, what not to do, what to do when you're looking at those. And he's also going to walk through the dashboard. So there's a dashboard that we can put up on the website as well that he will show the board as well at that point in time. So with that, at the end of that meeting or during that meeting, we'll provide the results. It ranks all of the programs into what's called different quadrants. So if it's in quadrant 1, it aligns the most with the goals of the township. If it's in quadrant 4, it's least aligned with the board goals. However, if the board goals don't specifically talk about one line item, you might look at something that's in the 4th quadrant and say, well, that's definitely a priority. Why is that the 4th quadrant? Well, it's probably because maybe it could be outsourced, or maybe it's because the board didn't specifically identify this as a goal, so kind of put it in a quadrant. You might also look at something in the 1st quadrant and say, well, that's not my highest priority, from a board perspective, it's not. So you kind of have to look at it, it's not going to be an exact science. You might look at some things and say, I think this should rank higher and these should rank lower, but it's just kind of mathematical formulas, and so some of them might look a little screwy. But they're going to walk you through that. So you're going to take that. We're going to give you that so you can mull that over for the next, month and a half or whatever. And then we're going to schedule a meeting for early 2024. We've had the discussion with the supervisor's office about scheduling it, but we haven't put it on the calendar yet about which date that's going to be. What I want to do is then do a 5-year projection. If you remember, it was probably a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, that I did a 5-year projection, and I had kind of plugged in, if we do these priorities under this year, here's where the fund balance is going to be. And what I do with those projections is I do more of where I think fund balance is going to be, not where it's budgeted to be, because we always finish a little bit better. So we budget salaries that 100% of every department is staffed 100% of the year each year. In actuality, we typically spend about 95% of the budget because there's turnover. So I take a look at those kind of things and look at trends and kind of project out the budget. So it'll look a little bit different than the budget. I use the budget as a starting point, but I take what we know from history and actually project that through. So we want to do that and kind of cover that with the other items that were not included from the board goals that were identified. And if there's other board goals we need to plug in, we can do that at that point in time as well to kind of show you where fund balance is going to be, because we are starting to use fund balance. More so, general fund is starting to get on the lower side. We want to make sure we're all comfortable with the general direction that we're heading. And as long as the board's comfortable, all these items that were excluded will be put back into the budget. The board tells us we want to come back and meet again, we want to look at a couple other things, and you want to look at the capital and reprioritize some things, we can do that as well. So we want to kind of paint the story for the next 5 years in early January. And I will send out as well the 5-year capital improvement plan, so you guys have that. And that will tie out to what's in the 24 budget and the 25 budget, and you can see what was included for 26 and 27. Questions?
All right, great. Thank you, Wendy. Thank you. That was a lot of work, and we really appreciate your staff for doing all of this and all the hard work and all the staff here that met with you and went over everything. And it's all in your head now, and we can just ask you anytime you want.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll stick too.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments from the board or staff members? Anything this weekend anybody want to talk about? Judge Mark Slavens is in the room behind us. All right, great. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Support.
Motion made by Treasurer Slavens, supported by Trustee Ganguly. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion passes. Thank you.